Alright, boys and girls, it's story time. I'm running a game of Pathfinder, and one of my players, we'll call him Player 1, asked me a question about changing his character's class. Now this was weird because, well, 3 reasons. 1, we only played 1 session. And 2, he actually did really well that session. And 3, he was playing an investigator. Now knowing Player 1 from previous games, that should have been a good fit for him. And honestly, the rest of the party needed the investigator's skills. He fit a good role in the party. Obviously something went really bad really fast. Well, there was another player. We'll call him Player 2. Player 2 was built to be a melee powerhouse. He was a Blood Rager, which is basically a barbarian until you get to level 4, but right now they're at level 1, so it doesn't matter. So the thing is, Player 2 was really good at close combat, and Player 1 had a strength score of 8. Now, Pathfinder is a game with a lot of options, and I know that in any game with a lot of options, it's possible to make a character that's just terrible. But that's not what Player 1 did. What Player 1 did was make a pretty good character, to be honest. He was the best skill monkey the party had, and he had good range support. But the problem is what he thought he needed to do. I have the distinct honor of being Player 1's first DM. He started out playing D&D about 2 years ago, and I love this guy. He's a great player. He gets excited about the game. He takes notes. He's actually interested in the story. He's great. I am so glad he's part of my campaign. And when I first decided to actually play a game with him, I decided to go with 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Because I knew it was a fairly simple system, and he'd never played a game like that before, so I thought it'd be easy on him. But I've come to realize that since that was his first campaign, he's got some preconceived notions of how these games are supposed to roll that just isn't true with other games, like Pathfinder. Specifically in this case, party roles and teamwork. In 5e, teamwork involves the whole party. Now let's say you've got a wizard, and he's got some ancient runes, and he's trying to figure out what in the world these runes mean. Now, you could just have him roll Knowledge Arcana and be done with it. Odds are he's not rolling alone. The rest of the party is helping. So you've got Thok the Barbarian can do the help action. That's now another d20 gets to roll and pick the highest. That's pretty good. Then you got the bard who's going to sing at him and he gets a d6 for that. And then you got the cleric who's going to pray at him and he's going to get a d4 for that. In the end, he's the one technically rolling. But look at how big of an effect the entire party has on him. There's a lot that they're putting into this. In fact, they're putting in more stuff than he actually has. He's supposed to be the expert on this. But really, anybody could make this roll and get a bonus higher than his bonus just because they have some extra help. Now let's say the party has to spy on somebody. Naturally, the rogue will want to just go and spy because, well, he's the rogue, and he's the guy that has a great stealth score. But this is 5e. In 5e, you don't have scouting missions, because you can literally bring the entire party along. Inspiration still works, guidance still works, even the help action still technically works, but on top of this, just one spell gives everyone a plus 10 bonus to stealth. That's way better than what the rogue gets normally. But even then, you just add in the fact that in 5e, only half the party needs to succeed anyways. You literally have the paladin clinking along, could even roll a natural 1 on his stealth score and get a negative number, but that doesn't matter because some other guy was just sneaky enough and that somehow makes the paladin quiet. I don't know, but it makes it simple, which is nice, but it also makes it where the rogue doesn't get to rogue. The rogue is just part of the group that's successfully sneaking on by. I know the rogue could get a stupidly high stealth score with expertise, could even make it to where they can't roll below a 19 easy because of reliable talent, but that doesn't really matter. Who cares if you're practically invisible at this point? You're just another success in the bucket. In the bucket of successes. Anyways, now let's say we have a interesting combat encounter happen where everybody is stuck in close combat. That's not a big deal. Even the support is going to do well, because in 5e, not only can you use your strength or your dexterity for the hit and damage rolls, but with the right perks, you can use charisma, wisdom, or even intelligence to hit and damage for weapon attack rolls. That's right, you can dump your strength, have the arms of a wet noodle, and still somehow hit someone over the head with a two-handed axe, and it works because you're just that smart. So in short, teamwork in 5e means the whole team is there. They're all getting involved, and they all stay involved. Even if there's one person in the party where that's supposed to be their specialty, the rest of the group butts in and can provide moral support that somehow works, like there's some kind of plucky Yu-Gi-Oh! Side character that's just screaming from the sidelines to use the heart of the cards, and it works somehow. Or, even worse, they're just one lucky roll away from being just as good as the person that's supposed to be an expert in the field. The experts themselves don't really get to shine in their element so much. Now let's look at the same situations, but using Pathfinder instead. So we've got the wizard, right? And he wants to figure out what these runes mean. Now, he can roll probably a knowledge check or linguistics to figure out what the ancient runes mean. Well, someone could try the aid another action. And that does help. But that's just a +2. Now, don't get me wrong, a player will take a +2, and they will be glad to have that +2. But that's not the same as rolling 2 dice and taking the highest. That's not the same as making a natural 1 an 18. That's a big difference. Also, if your character has no idea what they're doing with the skill, there's only a 50-50 chance that they're actually going to be able to help in the first place. Now, the bard can still sing at him, the cleric can still pray at him, and those do still help, but if you take a look at the amount that the expert puts in versus the amount that the rest of the party puts in, it's still clear who's doing the heavy lifting here. It's the expert. Now let's say the party wants to spy on somebody. If they try to bring the whole party along, they're gonna break stealth. So they have to send the stealthy characters. There's still some options for your not-so-stealthy characters. You could just buy a bunch of magical items to give them bonuses, which, I mean, it works, but that's a lot of money that they probably would want to spend on a nice, shiny magical sword instead. You could just cast invisibility on them, but that doesn't take care of the actual sound. And you could just cast silence on them to get rid of the sound. Which, I mean, I guess it works if you just are wanting to make sure that you're not seen. But you're not going to do any spy work on that. I mean, you can't even hear anybody. How good of a spy can you really be? So in this case, it's better to let the sneaky guys just go on ahead and do their sneaky thing. All the guys who aren't sneaky can wait as backup. Because, let's be honest, this is D&D. They're gonna get in trouble. Something bad is gonna happen. And then you get to rush in there and save the day. Now let's say everybody got stuck in close combat. Now that's a sticky situation, especially for low-level casters. You could cast touch spells, or maybe buffing spells, or debuffing spells, but you have to worry about attacks of opportunity. And yes, there is the concentration skill and you can cast defensively, but that isn't always guaranteed. Even at higher levels, you could technically roll a 1. There's a risk involved. And let's talk about support players. I mean, if strength was your dump stat, you better pray to Palor or whatever deity your character worships that you roll a 4 on that 1d4. Because there is no other way that you're gonna get more than just 1 damage with your little noodle arms. So basically, teamwork in Pathfinder isn't so much everybody does the thing. It means the character that's the specialist in the thing gets to do the thing. The rest of the party can help, sure, but if it's not their specialty, the help that they're going to provide is pretty limited. And you know what? That's okay, because someone else in the group will be able to do it. And they'll feel great getting to do the thing that they've made their character to do. Player 2 is a Blood Rager. He can do serious damage with his greatsword and power attack. But that's all he's got. He's got strength, he's got some constitution, a little bit of dex, and a little bit of charisma so he can cast some spells later on. But that's all he's got. He is just a melee monster. But that's it. He has no intelligence, no wisdom. Don't ask him to do any skill aside from maybe perception with any kind of competence. Player 1 never played Pathfinder, not as a campaign. So naturally, when he sees his buddy with a greatsword dealing out double-digit damage and one-shotting these CR 1/2 enemies, he's gonna look at his 1d4 -1 dagger and think, well, I have clearly done something wrong here. The problem isn't that he had terrible melee. The problem is that was the only thing he was focusing on. If you're always comparing your weakest abilities to someone else's strongest abilities, you're always going to fall short. But take a look at what you do have. Sure, Player 1's best combat abilities at this point is a crossbow. He can do 1d6 +1 damage if he's close enough. And that's not awful, but compared to Player 2's melee, it looks pretty pitiful. But do you know how many skill points this character gets? He gets 10 per level. That's more than the rest of his party gets total. In fact, if you take a look at the other guys in the party, he is head and shoulders over them, the best at skills. He's also an investigator, which means he can throw in inspiration dice on top of those skills. He can also roll any knowledge skill untrained, just because he's an investigator. Also, he has alchemy. He's got loads of stuff in alchemy that he can do. But he thought that he was supposed to build a character that was good at everything. And when you come from a game like 5th edition where everyone does the thing, and it's not just the specialist does his thing, it's easy to think that you're not pulling your own weight. And that's because you're not pulling your own weight. But you're not supposed to. And that's okay. The more I think about it, the more I personally like the Pathfinder way of doing things. Yes, I know, there are 1,000,001 feats and abilities in Pathfinder, and I am sure that you could find a combination that can avoid some of these limitations. But you have to purposefully build that way. Most builds in this game are specialists, and just like a real-life specialist, they are great at the field they specialize in. But when it comes to the fields that they're not specialized in, they're just normal. Maybe they're even bad. In 5e, most of the time, the entire party joins in on the roles. And, maybe it feels nice for the people who are helpers because they get to feel involved too. But the thing is, it takes away from the guy who's actually doing the role. It takes away from that specialist being able to say, this is my success that I am going to give to the party as my contribution. And instead, it just becomes our success, rather than something that you do for the party. That's basically it. And I know some people might not like the idea that their character can't do all of the things, and to each their own, but don't let that steer you away from a game like Pathfinder. Personally, I've played both 5e and Pathfinder for a few years, and they both have their merits. But for me, I think I'm going to stick to the Pathfinder way of this thing.